Picture this: hauling a colossal 320-ton boat uphill, underwater shoots that consume half the film's runtime, and wrestling with the complexities of working alongside a star like Wesley Snipes. Making a movie is rarely easy, but some productions cross into legendary territory for their sheer difficulty. Today, we're diving into 12 of the most grueling filmmaking experiences ever recorded. These films began with sky-high ambitions, but quickly derailed. Ballooning budgets, spiraling conflicts, and harrowing obstacles that tested everyone involved, from cast and crew to the very studios footing the bill. Some of these movies were abandoned by their actors, others nearly bankrupted entire studios, and a few even had to fend off wild animal attacks on set. It's a fierce competition for the title of hardest movie ever made, and while we'll spotlight notable examples, we're also eager to hear which films you think deserve this infamous crown. Let's start with the two giants that instantly spring to mind when discussing nightmare productions: Waterworld and Apocalypse Now. These films perfectly embody the chaotic maelstrom that a troubled shoot can become. Waterworld, often labeled Mad Max on water, envisioned a post-apocalyptic Earth submerged beneath rising seas due to melting polar ice caps. Humans cling to survival on boats, jet skis, and makeshift floating communities. Shooting this vision in the early to mid-90s demanded practical effects exclusively. No CGI magic back then to create a liquid world. The script endured countless rewrites, but once Kevin Costner signed on and director Kevin Reynolds joined the project, Universal Pictures greenlit a whopping $100 million budget to bring this aquatic dystopia to life. However, Steven Spielberg, having weathered the chaos of filming Jaws, cautioned them about the dangers of shooting in open water, but his warnings went unheeded. They pressed on, building enormous water enclosures off Hawaii's coast to simulate the endless ocean. But the weather didn't cooperate. Fierce waves repeatedly knocked camera crews off balance. Costner himself was nearly swept away in a storm while tied to a boat, and a terrifying near-drowning incident involved Jeanne Tripplehorn and young actress Gina Majorino. To make matters worse, a hurricane struck, obliterating many sets and sending the budget soaring. Script troubles persisted as well, prompting the producers to summon Joss Whedon to perform rewrites amid what he described as 7 brutal weeks of relentless tinkering. When all was said and done, production stretched across 157 grueling days, far exceeding the planned 96. And the budget ballooned to an unprecedented $175 million, making Waterworld the most expensive film ever made up to that point. The toll on personal relationships was severe too. Costner and Reynolds had been close collaborators on 3 previous projects, but the relentless pressure and creative clashes drove a wedge between them, culminating in Reynolds abandoning the film near its end, leaving Costner to see it through. As the tabloid headlines centered on budget blowouts and on-set disasters, many in Hollywood secretly hoped Waterworld would tank at the box office. And while it fell short of expectations, it didn't exactly fail either, cementing its place in cinema history as both a cautionary tale and a testament to persevering through production hell. Let's dive into the whirlwind saga behind some of cinema's most turbulent productions, where chaos behind the scenes almost overshadowed the stories on screen. Take Apocalypse Now, a film that faced so many obstacles it's almost legendary. The story follows a soldier navigating the dense jungles of Vietnam in pursuit of a rogue colonel who's drifted into madness with his own private army. It was helmed by Francis Ford Coppola, who initially tried to hand over the directing reins, but ultimately had to take charge himself. Filming primarily took place in the Philippines' lush jungles, but right from the start, trouble brewed. The original lead, Harvey Keitel, was replaced by Martin Sheen because his portrayal didn't match Coppola's vision. This was simply the beginning of a series of mishaps. A devastating typhoon, Olga, tore through the set, obliterating between 40% to 80% of the construction, including elaborate scenes like the Playboy Playmate set. After a painstaking rebuild and relocation efforts, the crew hoped the worst was over. But then came Marlon Brando's arrival, overweight and not in sync with the lean, enigmatic Colonel Kurtz Coppola had imagined. Even more challenging, Brando hadn't read the essential Heart of Darkness source material, leading to major rewrites and a revamped ending to accommodate the actor's presence. Brando and Coppola spent numerous days delving deep into character development, further extending production. In the final cut, Brando wears black and is predominantly shot in shadow to mask his physique, yet his portrayal of Kurtz remains one of the most unforgettable performances in film history. Meanwhile, Martin Sheen, only 36, suffered a heart attack during filming. His brother, Joe Estevez, stepped in for long shots and voiceovers to keep the production moving. Adding to the madness, Dennis Hopper was reportedly high throughout shooting, struggling with his lines. On top of these personal challenges, the movie's scope was colossal. Real helicopters, authentic military gear, cooperation with the Filipino government, and hundreds of extras. It's no wonder there's a renowned documentary exploring this intense making-of story, along with plenty of in-depth videos dissecting its trials and triumphs. Originally budgeted at $12 to $14 million, costs ballooned to $31 million. What should have been a 4-month shoot extended across 238 grueling days. Yet, unlike many troubled productions, Apocalypse Now didn't just survive, it thrived, winning acclaim from critics and audiences alike. Contrast this with Coppola's later passion project, Megalopolis. This ambitious film had been a dream simmering in Coppola's mind for 4 decades. Scripts circulated as far back as the 1980s, and Coppola was ready to self-finance, mirroring his approach with Apocalypse Now. But setbacks struck again, notably the disheartening failure of One from the Heart, another self-financed project that went disastrously off course. These tales remind us that filmmaking, while magical on screen, often demands Herculean effort, relentless resilience, and a touch of luck behind the scenes. Francis Ford Coppola found himself deep in debt with his passion project Megalopolis, taking a backseat as he directed other films to claw his way out financially. During this period, he released Bram Stoker's Dracula, Jack and the Rainmaker, steadily working to regain his footing. By 2001, Coppola finally secured enough funding to bring Megalopolis to life. He gathered an impressive lineup of stars and even started filming scenes around New York City. But then tragedy struck. The 9/11 attacks devastated New York, mirroring the movie's plot about a catastrophic disaster hitting the city and an architect striving to rebuild it as a utopia. This heartbreaking real-world event forced Coppola to rethink the project, and ultimately he shelved it. This setback was reminiscent of the struggles faced by Mad Max Fury Road, whose production was crippled in 2001 as the US dollar plummeted against the Australian dollar post 9/11, inflating costs dramatically. Fast forward to 2019 and Megalopolis rose from the ashes of development hell. Coppola invested a staggering $120 of his own money, selling a portion of his winery empire to fund the film's revival. Production wrapped recently, boasting a stellar cast and a planned release in 2024. Early reports are promising. Actor Adam Driver described it as one of the best shooting experiences of his life. Yet, while hope is high, it's worth noting that Coppola hasn't directed since 2011, and his glory days famously peaked in the 70s. Now, turning to another production saga steeped in challenges, Werner Herzog's Fitzcarraldo. Herzog is no stranger to audacious filmmaking, but this undertaking was extraordinary. The plot follows Fitzcarraldo, portrayed by Klaus Kinski, who dreams of building an opera house in the Peruvian Amazon. To reach a prosperous region of the Amazon basin, he plans to haul a steamship, an enormous 320 tons, over a treacherous 40-degree incline. Studios recommended using miniatures filmed on a studio backlot for such a daunting scene, but Herzog was undeterred. Insisting on authenticity, he journeyed to Peru with hundreds of indigenous extras and a Brazilian engineer who constructed an elaborate pulley system. Together, they physically hauled the massive boat up the slope. Herzog even dubbed himself the conquistador of the useless, convinced that no one else in history would attempt such a feat. Interestingly, the real Fitzcarraldo, the man inspiring the story, had never pulled off this stunt. He simply disassembled his 32-ton ship to move it. This production's ambition and danger extended beyond the uphill haul. It saw serious mishaps, including 2 small plane crashes, a lumberjack amputating his own foot after a snakebite, and attacks by scavenging tribespeople, leaving 2 crew members wounded by arrows to the throat and stomach. And that iconic ship crash scene? It was every bit as dramatic and fraught as the rest of the production journey. The shoot was nothing short of chaotic. The rapids were unforgiving, leaving several crew members injured, including cinematographer Thomas Mauch, who suffered horrific injuries to his hand. And then there was Klaus Kinski, whose volatile temperament turned the set into a powder keg of tension. Kinski was a whirlwind, throwing tantrums and fits with alarming frequency. Initially, 40% of the film had been shot with Jason Roberts, but when he fell ill, Kinski replaced him. Yet, Kinski's outbursts escalated so severely that at one point, an indigenous chief even offered Herzog to take lethal measures against him. Herzog, ever the steadfast director, refused, saying, "No, I still need him for shooting. Leave him to me." The drama behind the scenes was intense enough to inspire the captivating documentary Burden of Dreams, which meticulously chronicles this epic production and comes highly recommended. For those intrigued by the wild tales of both Kinski and Herzog, we've dedicated entire videos delving into their fascinating and tumultuous collaborations. You won't want to miss them. Before we keep going, if you're enjoying this journey through cinematic chaos, please consider liking and subscribing. It really supports the channel and keeps these stories coming. Now, let's shift gears for a moment. Moving away from unrelenting production nightmares, let's dive into the often stormy world of working with challenging actors, specifically with Blade. Trinity. On the surface, this film shouldn't have been so difficult, but it turned out to be way tougher than anyone anticipated. Difficult actors are nothing new. Legend has it that Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer caused havoc during the filming of The Island of Dr. Moreau.B. But Blade, Trinity had a singular source of trouble: Wesley Snipes. And to a lesser extent, meddling studio interference. David Goyer, who penned all 3 Blade scripts, stepped up as director for Trinity after Guillermo del Toro passed on the role. Snipes had absolutely adored working with del Toro on Blade 2, but was cold toward Goyer and unhappy with his new script. On top of that, Snipes was grappling with legal troubles related to looming tax issues, which would eventually land him in prison years later. This combustible mix turned Snipes into a tough presence on set. He outright refused to shoot certain scenes, to the point that if a shot wasn't a close-up of him, the production just used a stand-in. Comedian Patton Oswalt shared some amusing behind-the-scenes anecdotes, like Snipes locking himself away in his trailer, smoking weed, and even communicating solely through post-it notes signed from Blade. One of the most infamous moments from the shoot was when Snipes refused to open his eyes during a critical scene, forcing the crew to resort to CGI, which, unsurprisingly, looked awkward. The film's underwhelming box office performance, coupled with Snipes' on-set behavior, stalled his career for quite some time. Now stepping into the realm of sheer ambition and groundbreaking technology, James Cameron's The Abyss. Cameron has built a reputation on tackling the impossible, pushing the limits of filmmaking with each project. His journey into the abyss marked another leap into uncharted territory, especially with the technological innovations needed to bring the story to life underwater. Making Avatar was a colossal challenge and caused significant delays, while Titanic was a gigantic undertaking in its own right, with real dives to the shipwreck, constructing a full-scale set of the ship, and coordinating up to 1,000 extras, alongside 800 crew members. But then there's the Abyss, an entirely different kind of ordeal. The Abyss centers on a U.S. recovery team searching for a sunken American submarine in the Caribbean. Director James Cameron himself admitted, "I knew this was going to be a hard shoot, but even I had no idea just how hard. I don't ever want to go through this again." Remarkably, 40% of the film was shot underwater. The cast and crew endured grueling schedules, often working 6 days a week, 70 hours at a stretch during the 6-month shoot. Filming took place within 2 gigantic water tanks housed inside an unfinished nuclear power plant. Actors, typically submerged at a depth of 11 meters, were allowed just about an hour underwater at a time, while Cameron and his crew endured even more, spending roughly 5 hours submerged at 17 meters depth. The dangers were very real. Near drownings occurred frequently, including a harrowing incident involving star Ed Harris. During one scene, Harris was dragged 10 meters underwater with his helmet flooding with liquid, a moment he described as the most excruciating of the entire shoot. So traumatic was the experience that he later publicly distanced himself from the film, avoiding discussions about it altogether. The conditions inside the tank only added to the misery. Algae bloomed, reducing visibility to a mere 6 meters. Meanwhile, high chlorine levels caused painful skin burns and bleached divers' hair. During one shoot, the lights failed entirely, so dark that the crew couldn't even see their own hands right in front of their faces. Cameron, known for his demanding directorial approach, shouted commands over a PA system, often silencing complaints with remarks like, "I'm letting you breathe. What more do you want?" Countless people who worked on The Abyss consider it the toughest project they've ever faced. Yet despite the monumental effort and grueling conditions, the movie barely made waves at the box office. Critics generally praised it, but commercially it fell short compared to Cameron's other blockbusters. Shifting gears to 2 legendary cinematic disasters. Cleopatra and Heaven's Gate, films infamous for exploding budgets. Cleopatra premiered in 1963 and was the highest-grossing film that year, yet ironically, it still lost money. Why? The production was lavish to the extreme, constructing 79 elaborate sets and crafting 26,000 costumes. Elizabeth Taylor's wardrobe alone cost a staggering $194,800, and she earned a record-breaking $1 million salary at the time. While Cleopatra was undeniably grand in scale, it was plagued by production setbacks that skyrocketed its cost. Early on, Taylor's health suffered a major blow when she was diagnosed with meningitis, forcing repeated delays and eventually pushing filming into an indefinite hiatus. During this period, director Joseph Mankiewicz's involvement faced turmoil, complicating the already chaotic production. After the original director, Ruben Mamoulian, was replaced, the production faced a whirlwind of challenges. Mamoulian had already spent $7 million on just 10 minutes of footage, none of which was usable, in the first 16 weeks. The situation worsened when Taylor fell seriously ill with pneumonia, necessitating a tracheotomy that delayed filming even further. Once shooting resumed, the environment became chaotic. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, unhappy with the existing script, discarded it entirely and began anew. Working tirelessly, Mankiewicz juggled directing by day and writing by night, an intense schedule that even led to a cinematographer collapsing from exhaustion. The production saw numerous reshoots, continual script rewrites, and sets being torn down and rebuilt due to location changes, all of which drove the budget to unprecedented heights. Just as the crew thought they were gaining control, 20th Century Fox, financing the film, made a decisive cut, canceling certain battle scenes and terminating Taylor's contract prematurely. When Mankiewicz presented his first cut to the executives, they fired him, blaming him for the exorbitant budget. However, since he had been the sole creative force managing both the filming and script writing simultaneously, only he truly understood how the film should come together. Consequently, the studio rehired him to oversee the film's completion. Ultimately, the film's final budget soared to $31.10 million. Although it lost money in its initial year, it later recouped profits through rentals and distribution rights. Contrast this with the fate of Heaven's Gate, a film that flopped so spectacularly it earned only $3.50 million against a $44 million budget. Its failure was so notable that it became synonymous with box office disasters, even overshadowing Waterworld's struggles at times. The film's downfall is largely attributed to its director, Michael Cimino, who came off the triumph of winning 2 Oscars for The Deer Hunter and was eager to craft a Western epic with a modest $11.60 million budget. However, Cimino's own perfectionism proved to be his undoing. By the 6th day of filming, the project was already 5 days behind schedule. He demanded an extraordinary number of retakes, sometimes up to 50 for a single scene, delaying progress. He was also particular about lighting, often waiting for the perfect clouds before rolling the camera. Many scenes had to be shot during the fleeting golden hour just before sunset, leaving only minutes and a handful of takes each day. This led to significant downtime on set, with actor Sir John Hurt temporarily leaving to shoot the Elephant Man before returning to complete his role. Cimino's relentless pursuit of perfection escalated when he ordered an entire street built for the film to be dismantled because it didn't meet his vision. He wanted it 6 feet wider, but opted to tear down both sides and move them 3 feet each instead of just adjusting one side, a decision that compounded delays and costs. Unsurprisingly, the budget ballooned to $44 million by the end of production. Yet, even this wasn't the full story. When the studio United Artists realized the magnitude of the issues unfolding, it became clear that Heaven's Gate would not only strain their finances, but also mark a turning point for director-led filmmaking in Hollywood. Let's dive into an intriguing chapter of film history. When the production team behind a particular movie started questioning why their land rental costs were sky-high, they uncovered a surprising fact. The land belonged to none other than Michael Cimino. That revelation shed light on why the filming process seemed to drag on endlessly. The film in question faced a storm of critical backlash, especially due to its notorious instances of animal abuse. This backlash was so severe that the movie was pulled from theaters only to be re-released much later. The owner of United Artists was deeply concerned about the detrimental impact the film had on the studio's public image and the financial toll it took. As a result, just a year after the film's release, United Artists was sold to the owner of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, transforming it into an MGM subsidiary. Now, fast forward to a more recent production that also made waves for its tumultuous making, 2015's The Revenant. This film's production was famously described as a living hell, and for good reason. Centered on Leonardo DiCaprio as Hugh Glass, a fur trapper seeking brutal revenge after being left for dead by his own team. The film was directed and co-written by Alejandro Iñárritu, The initial budget was set at $60, but several challenging factors made this an exceedingly difficult project. The story unfolds in the freezing wilderness. The crew insisted on using only natural light for authenticity, and Leo endured immense physical hardships, all with the goal of winning that elusive Oscar. Most scenes were shot in the frigid Alberta wilderness during winter before moving to Argentina once the snow started melting. The team opted to film in chronological order, stretching what was supposed to be an 80-day shoot into several months. Working exclusively with natural light significantly limited the daily filming window, and the remote locations meant up to 40% of each day was lost to travel. These conditions pushed both cast and crew to their limits. Temperatures plummeted to 25 degrees C, causing constant equipment breakdowns. Although no severe injuries occurred, many crew members either quit or were let go. Alejandro Iñárritu likened this to a conductor removing instruments that were out of tune to preserve the orchestra's harmony. Leonardo DiCaprio's ordeal was legendary. He plunged into freezing rivers, slept wrapped in animal carcasses, consumed raw bison liver, and intensely prepared to embody his character. He described filming as experiencing 30 to 40 sequences among the hardest physical challenges of his career. The budget ballooned from $60 to $135 million, yet the risk paid off as the film became a huge box office success and finally earned Leo his Oscar, even if he had to survive a bear attack to get it. Speaking of animal encounters, the 1981 film Roar holds the notorious title for the most animal-related injuries sustained during production, and is often called the most dangerous film ever made. The story revolves around a naturalist living in an African wildlife preserve teeming with big cats. The film was the brainchild of the husband and wife duo Noel Marshall and Tippi Hedren, who not only starred in the film but also financed it together. Their goal was to raise awareness about poaching and the plight of big cats, but the production was fraught with peril, involving close interactions with wild animals that led to numerous injuries. Let's dive into the incredibly wild and perilous world behind the making of some unforgettable animal-filled films. One particularly notorious example is the production of Roar, which started with an ambitious budget of $3 million. Over time, the crew gathered around 150 big cats along with several elephants and large birds. However, the majority of these animals were untrained, turning the set into a veritable danger zone. The toll on the crew was staggering. Reports estimate that at least half of the 140-person team suffered injuries during the shoot, with some newer assessments suggesting over 100 people were hurt. Director Noel Marshall endured a lion bite to his hand during a fierce fight scene, followed by a bite to his leg, and a total of 10 documented injuries by the time the production wrapped up. His wounds became serious, including infections like blood poisoning and gangrene. His wife, Tippi Hedren, wasn't spared either. She was bit on the head by a lion during a promotional shoot, the animal's teeth scraping dangerously close to her skull. To make matters worse, an elephant lifted her by the ankle with its trunk, fracturing it. That same elephant delivered a brutal kick to its trainer, breaking her shoulder. The carnage didn't end there. A cinematographer was scalped by a lion, and the assistant director faced bites to the throat and jaw. This was no ordinary film shoot. It was a brutal gauntlet that tested everyone's limits. Complicating matters further, the shoot dragged on for years beyond its original schedule. Weather woes, including heavy flooding, continually disrupted production, catapulting the budget from $3 million to a staggering $17 million. In the end, Roar was a commercial failure, with some speculating that the project suffered under a curse, especially given Marshall's involvement with the horror classic The Exorcist. Switching gears, but keeping with animal-centered chaos, let's look at the 1967 film Dr. Dolittle. While it didn't reach the same level of mayhem as Roar, it still faced significant hurdles. The production involved over 1,200 live animals, ranging from dogs and pigs to giraffes. Rex Harrison starred as the veterinarian who could talk to animals, a role that turned out to be quite challenging, especially since Harrison's difficult behavior on set only compounded the existing challenges. The animal antics here could easily have fit into a comedy. A goat devoured the script, a fawn ate paint, and required an emergency stomach pump, squirrels nibbled away at vital set pieces, and sheep repeatedly urinated on Harrison, forcing countless takes. Perhaps the most memorable moment involved a scene where the animals had to remain perfectly still. Harrison, convinced that the director Richard Fleischer shouted "cut" mid-performance, stopped singing. Fleischer denied calling "cut" until they both heard the command, only to realize it came from a parrot repeating the word. Even simple tasks turned out to be problematic. For example, when trying to film ducks swimming in a pond, the ducks sank because their feathers were not yet water repellent for the season. Alongside these animal challenges, inclement weather, crew illnesses, and even a disgruntled local resident who tried to bomb the set created a perfect storm of trouble. The film's budget ballooned from $6 million initially to $17 million, and it ultimately failed to impress at the box office or with critics. These behind-the-scenes stories reveal the immense difficulties and unforeseen dangers filmmakers face when working with animals. Both Roar and Dr. Dolittle highlight the unpredictable nature of animal actors and the incredible persistence required to bring such ambitious projects to life, despite all odds. One of the toughest films to ever make is 2002's Russian Art. This experimental masterpiece follows a ghost wandering through the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, moving seamlessly across different historical eras. What made the film incredibly challenging was its method of filming, a single continuous take, no hidden edits like in Birdman. The entire story unfolds as the camera journeys through 33 rooms of the Russian Hermitage Museum, featuring over 2,000 actors and 3 live orchestras, all captured in one unbroken 96-minute shot. The museum even offered to close for 2 full days to assist with filming, but director Alexander Sokurov confidently declined, insisting he only needed 1 day. Using a Sony HDWF-900 camera, they rigged an external hard drive carried by an assistant who followed the cameraman, ensuring continuous recording. With just 4 hours of daylight, Sokurov had limited chances to get it right. His first attempt failed just 5 minutes in, and subsequent tries stumbled much later. As the battery dwindled and time ran out, he had just one final opportunity, and that last take delivered what was needed. Except for one glitch where a violinist briefly looked straight into the camera. The pressure was immense, not only from the sheer technical demands, but also from the language barrier between Sokurov, who spoke only Russian, and the cinematographer, who spoke only German. They relied heavily on a translator during the hectic shoot. To this day, Russian Ark holds the record for the longest single continuous shot in a film, a feat unlikely to be surpassed anytime soon. And there you have it, 12 films that stand as some of the most difficult ever made. But before we wrap up, we can't resist adding a bonus mention, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yes, it's technically 3 movies, not 1, but its sheer scale and ambition demand recognition. It wasn't plagued by production nightmares per se. Sure, a few cast members suffered broken toes along the way, but the immense challenge lay in its colossal scope. From adapting J.R.R. Tolkien's once-thought unfilmable epic to shooting all 3 films simultaneously, a method rarely seen today, it was an unprecedented undertaking. The trilogy masterfully blended practical and digital effects, pushing the entire film industry forward. Every time you watch these films, it's astonishing to realize such a monumental project was even possible. It proved to Hollywood that no story is too grand to bring to the screen. There are countless documentaries and in-depth videos exploring the making of these incredible films, but we don't want to keep you too long since this video is already packed with information. So that's our list of 12 of the hardest films to make. Are there others you think deserved a spot? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe for more, and consider supporting us on Patreon for some awesome perks. Until next time, take care and enjoy the world of cinema.